It is such a heavily stigmatized and taboo subject. And I did, as you say, I started out a skeptic. I finished working for the Australian 60 Minutes program in 2018. And while I was working for 60 Minutes, because of the ongoing budgetary tightening in my own network, we would often share crews. And so I would have time in America where I was basically sitting on my hands, getting very bored, and often in places like the East Coast, DC, or New York. And it sounds fun, but after a while it got very boring. And I thought about, well, what's something I could research while I'm here? And I've long had an interest in the US national security state. I've done stories about Echelon, which was the big Five Eyes communications surveillance spying operation that we revealed the existence of back in, I think, 2012. And so I had sources in the US intelligence community who'd helped me with that story. And I freely admit, I started out on the UFO subject thinking that I was going to debunk it because, like most journalists, you assume naturally that there is a black program that the United States is concealing and that essentially all of this is purely terrestrial technology developed by the US and the black, often in collaboration with its allies. And that there's essentially a collusion to keep this secret from the public because we don't want to give our foreign adversaries a heads up on what's really going on. I happened to be in Washington, D.C., and I reached out to somebody I'd met in Afghanistan who was quite a senior intelligence official who I'd met at a forward operating base in Afghanistan. And they'd, as it turned out, progressed in the intelligence service that they were in. And I rang them out of the blue and they said, come and meet me in a Georgetown bar. And I sat down over a beer, a Sam Adams Boston Lager, and I kind of swallowed my words a little bit because I was nervous to ask him. But I basically said, look, I'm really interested in getting to the bottom of this UFO nonsense. What's the story? And, obviously you can't tell me what secret black program, whether it's the Aurora or the TR-3B, but I assume the US is working on something in the black. And I'm going to do the story and write the book that reveals this. And there was this kind of embarrassed pause as this person took my measure. And they basically said to me off the back, they basically said, Ross, this is not US technology. We've got some of it, but it's not ours. And I said, oh, so it's Russian, Chinese. And they went, no. And I said, you're joking. And that was my introduction. Basically, I was told very early on that this was non-human recovered technology. And I was lucky because I'd built a relationship with someone who trusted me over a period of many years of writing on boring national security issues, disastrous wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that person trusted me, and they introduced me to certain people. I had another meeting the same trip in another Georgetown bar, and I was basically told that the United States recovered non-human technology 80 plus years ago, and that this was a secret that a lot of people felt it was time to be told. And I guess I was seen as a responsible pair of hands because I was known. I've worked with American Special Forces covering stories. I've worked in different war zones. I've covered intelligence stories, and they kind of let me into the secret. But that didn't mean all the doors opened. Basically, I was told I'd have to do my own work because this was such a highly protected subject that I had absolutely no way. I was told adamantly that nobody would speak on the record. And I took that as a bit of a challenge, to be honest. I figure a story, as a journalist, you get a kind of a spiritual belief that a story wants to be told. And I had a really strong sense that this story wanted to be told. I'd spoken to Christopher Mellon by this stage, a former Deputy Undersecretary of the Department of Defense, who flatly admitted to me that the phenomenon was real and that it was non-human, and that he, as a very senior defence official, was frustrated that this was being suppressed from public knowledge. And I guess, like every intelligence reporter, I thought there must be an explanation for this. Maybe they're protecting foreign adversaries from knowing what we've done with the technology. And people laughed at that idea. They said, no, that's not a fair explanation. And I said, well, maybe they're worried about the ontological shock. Maybe they're concerned that the public might have their religious beliefs thrown up in the air. And they went, no, that's not really it either. And I said, well, what is it? And everybody kind of looked a bit embarrassed. And it's basically a habit. I mean, it's something that has grown up over decades, that it's more comfortable to deny than to admit, that so many crimes, as I've discovered, have been committed to conceal it, including, I believe, murder. That I think a decision has been made that they're going to continue the cover-up as long as possible.